We're online and so are you. In this episode, I thought we would do a bit of a stock take on what it means to be successful and relevant online today. And that's why I invited Anastasia on to redefine some of the rules, because the rules have changed completely. And if you are reading books from as little as 5 years ago, then it's probably outdated by now, just because of the speed at which things are changing. So buckle up, and I'd probably recommend taking notes for this one. There's some really useful stuff on how to be successful and build a successful business online today. Enjoy. So you've been sort of in the online business world for a number of years, from courses to funnels to digital products, and I'm particularly curious on your sort of perspective on this. So for example, being successful in the early 1900s looked very different to being successful today. Like the things that categorized you as a successful individual have changed in the last 100 years by a lot. And I think it's changed even faster in the last 2 years, or even last year. And I'm curious, in this world of AI that we're finding ourselves in, how have the rules of success and being relevant online changed?
I love this question because I feel like rules have changed quite a lot, and there's a lot of speculation online and frankly fear-mongering. What I see happening, at least in the last 5 to 6 years, is that back in 2018 to 2020, even maybe up until 2022, people could just slap a vague promise, allude to something very wishy-washy, and their audience would still completely lap it up and be super excited. You could say something as abstract as be your best self or come into your power, and people would just buy like crazy if you were convincing enough. And that has definitely changed for a number of reasons. Not just AI, it's also the general economic climate that influences it. But I feel like you need to be a lot more specific than people used to be. You cannot afford to be vague, and you cannot afford to be wishy-washy. And what I also feel like changed is how before, let's say, the older generation of online courses and the older generation of online entrepreneurs were almost a catch-all. If you think about the old business coaches, they were trying to appeal to every single possible business out there. If I'm thinking of the likes of Marie Forleo or Emmy Porterfield or the very early Russell Brunson, they were trying to basically catch all. And now what we're seeing, especially because AI can actually give you this generalized advice, and because of the social algorithms that make it so much easier to find people who share your niche interests, you don't actually need to cater to a wider audience. I mean, this has been the golden marketing rule, which no one ever wanted to follow, is don't try to be for everyone. But now it is really even more true. If you try to be for everyone, you will get lost in the sea of sameness. You will just not stand out. I would say twofold, right? You need to be more specific, more than ever before. And you need to know exactly who you're serving, because otherwise you'll blend in.
I think sea of sameness is a really interesting point that segues really nicely into sort of another thought or question that I wanted to throw your way, because a lot, and as a creative myself, a lot of the pushback I've seen from the creative industry has been that, now AI can generate images, for example. Writing was somewhat less scary because we sort of assumed it would be able to do that, but now that it can generate realistic people and pictures and art styles. But that being said, the pushback to that pushback has been this idea that there is a level of sea of sameness in AI. So where AI has now been able to produce generically good content, where it's it's good enough to sort of blend into the sea of sameness. I feel like there's the pros and cons to that, but do you think it's sort of leveled the playing field for creators, that everyone is now on this at least good enough level? or has it made it even harder to stand out?
Mm, I'm so torn on this because I definitely feel like, of course, it's easier to create content with AI than without, but I wouldn't necessarily say that what people were creating before was that much better. Because if I'm being completely honest, you would look at any marketing strategy from before AI, and it would still be the same old cliches. People would still be reusing or, let's say, getting inspired by somebody else's marketing campaigns. Maybe not to the same scale as AI, but I feel like the way people extrapolate ideas, like we tend to copy each other or still like an artist, whatever you want to call it. And of course, AI makes it easier. Like even if you don't have a knack for writing, even if you don't have a knack for creative fields, you can now do this easier than before. But just like with cliche, average campaigns 6 years ago were not so well performing. They won't be as well performing with AI. And I feel like we will see a lot of companies go head into AI and utilize it to the point of automating every single process and then realizing that it's not actually the tool that matters, but who uses this tool. I think of an analogy of using a paint and a brush. You could use the same brush and the same canvas and the same paint as, let's say, Rembrandt, but can you paint the same way if you don't have the skill and if you don't have the discernment and if you don't know what good looks like? So I think if you invest the time into building your skill and then you know what good looks like, AI is like steroids and it can give you the super speed. It can make it so much easier for you. But if you don't know what good looks like, it can just take you, well, right into the field of average just because you cannot discern what makes a certain thing good or what makes a certain thing bad. So, yeah, I definitely feel like we will see an avalanche of content, whether that's social media posts or courses or videos. And I am personally dreading the era of the dead internet. Like, I'm not gonna lie. If I see AI generated content, I am just like, I'm sorry, I'm just not interested. Um, but I also do feel like it is going to spike a second wave of a renaissance, if you will, of people wanting to be creative themselves because that's just inherently enjoyable. Like, I do believe that there still is space for good writers and good copywriters and good videographers and photographers, even though AI can do all of those things. Um, but I feel like people just inherently, first of all, they will enjoy it, and second of all, people connect with other people's art. I don't imagine people connecting with AI art as much, or maybe I'm just being too conservative.
I think you and me both are perhaps too conservative, if that is the case, because I feel the same way. Yeah, there's like a certain level of emotion lacking, and I can't put a finger on why, because it doesn't necessarily look different, but it feels different, which is a lot harder. Before we get into the sort of like main topic of this episode, I just want to touch on, because you mentioned this idea of like automating everything. For you personally, and how you interact with AI on a daily basis, whether it's personal or work related, are there certain, or what parts of your work or processes or systems do you very intentionally not involve AI in?
Not anything creative. So I'm not an AI hater, even though it might seem like it from some of the phrases I say, but I actually use AI daily, like multiple hours a day. It saves me a ton of time, but I never outsource thought leadership. And I never go to AI without having a first draft first. So let's say if I'm working on a certain piece of content, or if I'm working on a landing page or a newsletter, I would never just go to AI with a simple prompt and say, hey, my ideal client is person X, and this is what they're struggling with. Write me a newsletter. Maybe that would have saved me time, but I highly doubt that it would put my exact opinion or spin on it. Even though my ChatGPT and Claude, they know everything about me, right? Even though they have so many examples of my writing, but I find it never quite hits the nail on the head. And then I know everybody says, well, that's just the first draft and you need to adapt it. And obviously, you don't take it as is. But truthfully, I think once you have the first draft in front of you, it's just hard to edit it completely. And you're still being steered into one direction over the other. So, what I actually like to do is have like a very messy brain dump first draft, or have a general direction before I involve AI into anything. So I don't necessarily use it for brainstorming. I also, to the shock and gasping of all of the marketers who've been preaching that, I honestly think that using AI for customer research is nonsense. Like, I'm sorry. I just feel like it's lazy. I feel like just get on the phone with your customers, just like reach out to people because like where is AI synthesizing this information from? From some random forums, you don't know where the information is from some random YouTube videos of somebody saying that said that. It's like all hearsay. So maybe it's good for like getting a first feeler out. But yeah, I don't think AI is a good customer research partner. But for everything else, for summarizing ideas, for data analysis, like super fast, for crystallizing common themes, for, just sometimes I'm also too lazy to fix my typos. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. For automating processes, like, I mean, N8N, if you know how to use it, can save you quite some time. So I'm excited about that part. But yeah, never the creative process, never the customer facing research. Yeah, I guess those two would be the biggest parts.
So with all of that said, I think I've seen it once or twice or a few times, I'm not sure now, but this idea of like not necessarily needing a massive following to build a profitable online business. I'm curious, firstly, your take on that, plus like what actually keeps a creator relevant today? Like when all these things are at risk or are currently being automated by AI, where does that online relevance come from?
So to answer the first part of the question, I say that all the time, but not necessarily that you don't need a following to build a business. You do need reach, but you don't need a massive following to start making money. I see this all the time when I talk to people. They first think that they need to hit 10K, 100K followers or have this massive ad budget and like then they will be able to start. And that's just not correct. And in fact, the longer you wait to validate your idea, the more it can bite you in your little bum, because the longer you wait, the more effort and time you will invest into creating whatever it is you're creating, a course, a membership, whatever. But if you never test it with real people, you don't actually know if they want to buy it or not. So you don't necessarily need a massive audience. Honestly, you just need a group of like 5 to 10 people who are your ideal client so you can test the idea and validate it and just see if it works or not. But for building your business long term, for sure, you need reach. Of course, like every business thrives on leads and reach. And I feel like this ties into the second part of the question. What you need to stay relevant is, I believe, now more than ever, every single company, whether you're a freelancer or an agency or a B2B company or a D2C company, I don't care. Every company is a media company nowadays. This idea has been floating around way before AI and people have been sort of discarding it. But I feel like now everybody's waking up to the fact. After seeing Rode being sold to Elf Cosmetics for allegedly 1 billion, people see that media was one of the most important components for that. And they heavily utilized YouTube and social media. When people see info entrepreneurs or even private equity firms like the Hormozis, who have a valued net worth of 100 million, yet they are still online producing media content because it gives you a certain level of credibility. And before 2022, I would argue that you could have, if you had an ad budget, you didn't necessarily need to be online. Like you didn't need to be on social media, on YouTube, on Instagram. You could just like plaster your ad budget on it and leads would come in and people would build trust. Now people are a little bit more mistrustful, or they want to see who you are, they want to connect to you on some level. And so without having that online persona or presence, better said, you're just missing a very essential piece. Your ads will convert, of course. People will not build that trust with you. And so yeah, I feel like knowing that every single person and every single company would benefit from having a brand online and having a presence online, and not just like any checkbox presence. You need to stand for something. I don't mean political views and I don't mean any world pressing issues, but you need to occupy a space and you need to be, for the lack of a better word, opinionated. Because what does AI do? It gives you the lay of the land. It's like, oh, I don't know. This way might be better, or this way might be better. Have you considered this? It depends. And it depends is very often the correct answer. I'm not arguing. But as an expert, what people are expecting of you is to show them the correct way. They want to offload that decision-making process. They don't want to go back to ChatGPT and ask it 10 times, hey, so what is correct for my case? Just tell me what to do. So if you can build that trust and that goodwill and be the person they trust, I think that will keep you relevant.
I couldn't agree more, and I love this idea of like taking a stance, because I often feel like it's so risky, and we were talking about what not to hand off to AI. I think getting it to generate your opinions, like, that scares the shit out of me, because if everyone is just against each other posting the AI, I mean, I've done it myself before. I'm like, how do I respond to this comment? But when it comes to having a business, like, if you want to be in a position where if someone came up to you on the street and said, sell me your product now, you want to be able to win their trust over within the first minute there. You don't have time to quickly chat GPT a response or whatever the case is. And if you don't for yourself know, and I think that's exactly what this idea of having a stance, and sure, get AI to put it into a pretty LinkedIn post for you. But yeah, I think that opinion, I think, is super core and keeps us human in many ways. Given that, I think this ties really nicely in, because I was sort of thinking, like, if someone was starting today with no audience, like, what, from a practical point of view, what kinds of things should they focus on in, say, the first 3 months when it comes to this idea of being visible sustainably?
Well, I would say having no audience, you still need to assess where are you in your journey, because somebody might have no audience and also very little prior experience, and their way would be slightly different from someone who has been in an industry that they're in for years and then just never built an audience. But to summarize it in several easy steps, I would definitely get clear on which space exactly you want to own and who you're talking to. And I don't mean like those boring persona graphics which tell you what magazines they read and like what music they listen to, what brands they love. I mean, this is all nice and dandy if it helps you make your target audience more personable, but on a more tangible level, like, what is it that keeps them up at night? What is it that they're like really want to change or really want to achieve? Because if you don't know that, you'll just say very generic things that don't really hit a nerve with people, and they will just not pay attention. And then once you know that, I would suggest, if you don't have any audience, start building it. There's no way around it. So like I said, you don't need much to get started. You just need 5 to 10 customers, but you always need to think ahead of the game. So the best way to start building an audience is still by using email. Yes, even in 2025, people are always appalled when I say that, but it's the most important channel any business can have, because if all of the social media networks were to disappear tomorrow, you would still, quote unquote, own your email list and you would still have a direct line of communication to your audience. So definitely start by building the email list, have a resource that gives your people a quick win that they can immediately download and immediately see results, which will build the goodwill. And I would just say, take having no audience as a chance. It's honestly not as bad as it used to be several years ago. Let's say 2018 or 2020 were the times where having a massive audience was actually an unfair advantage, for sure, because this would jig the algorithms. Your post would be seen by more people. Now it's actually not the case at all. I think it was Gary Vee who coined this term, the interest-based algorithms, but the nutshell of it is, it doesn't matter how many followers you have and how many people are already following you. It matters which topic your posts are on, and it matters how many people of that specific cohort react to it. So it's basically leveling the playing field for everybody, for massive accounts and for small accounts. Every new post that you're posting is like a lottery ticket. So if you address it, and this is where knowing your audience comes from, if you can address it so it hits a nerve with your ideal client, more and more people like that will see it. This is also why you see massive accounts have like reaching maybe 100 people, and then you see this one account with 100 followers all of a sudden reaching millions. So it's much more topic and content based. You don't need a following anymore. Our feeds have changed. You can get discovered by your people as long as you talk to them directly. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Don't let that stop you. As long as you're appealing to your target audience, you can grow your audience super fast.
Very, very useful. As a sort of final thought for this very short episode, but I feel very useful and interesting anyways. I'm curious, if you had to start your business from scratch today, and you sort of still have everything you've learned and you have access to all the tools available today, what would you do differently now to stay future-proof?
Such an interesting question. I would say one massive shift I'm seeing in an info product space is that people are moving away from courses and towards communities. And it makes so much sense for me, not only because of the recurrent revenue, but because you are just in so much more regular contact with your audience. And I feel like I would have made this shift with clients I'm working with earlier, and in my own products earlier, that I would capitalize on community a lot more. And yeah, because community in its essence is also, it serves the same purpose as an email list. You have a direct line of communication to your people all of the time. So yeah, I would say that is the biggest learning.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with friends and family that you think might find it interesting too. And if you're feeling super nice, then leave a review. It would be super appreciated. And yeah, I'd smile a lot. But thank you, and hopefully see you on the next episode.